Hello and good morning. Welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we keep you updated with all that is happening from the Nigerian newspaper. I am Sele Lashidasho, and I'll be doing this together with Rachel Tansey. Good morning.
Morning, Sele.
How you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
I'm great. Thank you so much. And so today, to our viewers, before we get into the papers, we want to talk a little about today happens to be the International Day for the girl child, and for a girl child out there, we want to wish you a happy girl child day. And I think it's important, Rachel, we talk about the girl child because, and it happens that it falls on Wednesday. Every 11th of October is being marked as a day to celebrate the girl child. Yesterday we celebrated the mental, where it is important that we take care of our mental health, and today we are looking at the girl child. And it happens that most of the issues of mental problems we have mostly happens to either adolescents or women, because they are being faced with one challenge after another, talking about maternity cases, talking about violence, talking about molestation, talking about rape and all manner of things. And then this year, UNICEF said that we need to have a team for the girl child, and which happens to be invest in girls' right, our leadership, our well-being. And I think it's important we invest in the girl child. I remember when we had the issue of the kidnapping in Zamfara here in Nigeria, and also that of Christina. It happens to be that mostly it is the female students that were mostly being, and it actually stands as a threat for education for the girl child in a time where we want the girl child to be exposed to education. For each time you get globally, a statistic has been taken that when it even comes to having access to internet, the male child has more access to the internet than the female child. And then talking about spending lots of hours in unpaid job, there was a time we're looking at some of the women and also girls that were being getting involved in domestic work, going to help people. And then I remember bringing it over here and we talk about it together, where we said some of them are being paid as low as 700 naira for spending more than 8 to 7 hours in the farmland. And then imagine you're just going home with less than 1,000 naira in a time where 1,000 naira right now is equivalent to $1 or even more. So a lot of things, talking about the conversation of exposing the girl child to what she needs to have, not just at this age, but even as she progresses to being a woman. We're talking about that the women are not even being given equal right when it comes to participation in politics, policy making, government, and all of that. And I think it's important that we rally around not just Nigeria but globally to see what can be done for the girl child, so she can be exposed to what she needs to have, the necessary resources to actually empower herself. Because we keep saying this, the fact that when you educate a girl child, you're educating the whole society, because she doesn't just hold it to herself, she shares with everybody. So I think it's the right time that we have that conversation, because with a lot of things that are going on presently, you will agree with me, Rachel, that it's time that we empower the girl child. Let her feel loved, let her feel wanted. Not about fighting that what a man can do, a woman can do. No, but we're talking about an equal space to actually exercise our right also as a girl child. We shouldn't be treated as a second sex, and then everything when it comes to it, and. But then you should be given that equal right to also show what you can contribute to nation building.
All about equal opportunities, Helen. I believe that the world is gradually moving towards that. It is at a fast pace, because trust me, the number of other school girls have reduced over the years. We might be having few issues left right there. We might be having regions and societies that still are a little bit backward in their thinking and what they believe. However, we have more girls going to school. We have a lot of girl empowerment going on, and the society is beginning to change. The world at large is beginning to change. We see women holding key positions, women getting some opportunity that some 20 years back was not available, even when it comes to wages, even when it comes to our voices being heard, when it comes to domestic violence, and even when it comes to many other things. You can see that the girl child is no longer left out as before, because over the years we've seen many non-governmental organizations together with the governmental organizations coming up and saying, you know what, the girl child is as important as any other child, and unless we wake up and do something about it. So that movement for decades now is what we are seeing as the result of it, that women are getting to have more opportunity out there. And I think it's all about equal opportunity. And it's not about mixing the roles. It's not about who can do this or who can do that better. It's all about allowing the girl child to be able to become what she wants to be, because she also can be that regardless of her gender. Because there is no place that says you can't be a good doctor because you are a woman. There's no place that says you can't be an engineer because you are a woman. Times are changing. It's not about lifting concretes anymore. It's all about the brain work, your intelligence, your ideas, the new innovations you have. All of these things are what is changing and shaping the course of the world as it is now globally. So everybody should be able to find their space regardless of their gender. And I believe that this is what the Girl Child Day is all about, is for us to know that, you know what, empower your female children, empower them, because you just never know. The world is changing compared to how we know it before.
True.
And you can streamline education, you can streamline knowledge or enlightenment or exposure that would be very dangerous to the society. And we have seen things change over the course of years.
Of course, you've said it,
Yeah.
Rachel, because times are changing. I mean, we've seen women breaking the glass,
We've
breaking
seen.
protocols the way things were before. I mean,
Yes.
right now we have the girl child also going to say, I want to study mechanical engineering.
Yes.
I want to study other occupations that initially we've been looking at. Say, this
This
is
is
just
just
for
a-
the male child.
yes.
Let's let this. But I'm happy with the way things are changing. And we've seen women that have done great to actually
We
show the
have
light
seen
to
that.
other girls child, letting you know that if they can do this, you can also do it. It's all about the brain, putting all your effort into it. And so just like the theme is to invest in the girls, right?
Exactly.
I hope that this is actually to our leaders out there a question: how much are you spending to actually invest in the girls in the country? So we'll just go down through the papers and then to wish everybody again a happy International Girl Child Week. Let's take a look at the papers, starting with the first paper, Nigerian Tribune.
On Nigerian Tribune, Army Court sends Major General Mohammed to 7 years in prison, orders refund of $2.1 million and 1.65 billion naira. You can find details on page 29. Aidatiwa appeals as Ondo Court strikes out case to halt his impeachment. You can find details on page 16. 5.4 million electorate to vote in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa states, a statement coming from INEC. IMF commends bold reforms in Nigeria. We have Siva appeals ruling disqualifying him from Bayelsa Guba race. You can find details on page 16. The big story on the paper, crude oil theft. Senate to probe security forces, militia groups. You can find details on page 5. Nigerian employers pay over 60 different taxes annually. A statement coming from NECA. You can find details on page 6. NECO releases 2023 SSCE results, withholds over 12,000 results to sanction 93 schools for mass cheating. Death toll hits 1,830 as Israel-Palestine war reaches day 4. Import volume crashes by 60% at Lagos port. Jobs may be affected. Contractors in gang up against federal government over policy on asphalt. This is a statement coming from the works minister. And compromised staff will be flushed out, sent to ICPC, he says. Reps to probe use of foreign currencies for domestic transactions in Nigeria. Tell CBN to stabilize naira against dollar and other currencies. And then we have a picture story where we can see the former president Goodluck Jonathan as he is observing elections in Liberia in one of the polling stations. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Senate condemns 2.3 trillion oil theft, probe security agents. More detail of that story can be found on page 29. Inflation to slow Nigerians grew to 2.9%, says the IMF. Flood kills 45, displaces 171,545 persons in 13 states. This is a report coming from NEMA. You can find more on page 8. And on forex crisis, which is the big story, Naira plunges to 1,025. naira per dollar. Job loses, factory shutdown looms. With the rider, forest crisis hinder raw material procurement, causes financial problem coming from NECA. And then we have the SMEs, the cry impending shutdown, reps probe airlines and school demanding dollars. And I think this is where the reps have to be very strict about the issue of schools that demand for pay of school fees in dollars. I mean, if you're in Nigerian soil, let us pay the school fees in our naira, not in the dollar. I think we have to be very strict about certain policies that the reps put, or certain policies that are being passed by the House, whether the reps or even the Senate. And then quite a lot of things, Rachel, things are really not going well with the issue of yesterday. We woke up to the news of 1 kg of gas is now 1.2. That is to say that you eventually start buying 12 kg at about 12,000, 13,000 naira. And then here we're seeing even SMEs are complaining. A lot of factories are shutting down. And yesterday we saw where marketers say they cannot even import the oil into the country because of scarcity. So a lot of things are going with that inflation rate. Transport fare is very high. Food prices. In fact, if you go to the market, if you have the money, just buy what you can buy. Because if you say you want to come back tomorrow, the price will change eventually. So a lot of things are just working in a way that, well, but we hope that we will actually pass this. It's one of those phases. Yeah. We hope that with all of the right things put in place, we will pass this test as well. Still on the Punch newspaper, we are having the picture story here showing us the NCPC suspending pilgrimage to Israel. Lagos contingent returns. You can see them when they were being evacuated back into the country. 18 parties just still for 5.4 million votes in Kogi, Imo, and Bayelsa. More detail of that can be found on page 8. Army General jailed 7 years, ordered to refund 3.7 billion naira. You can find that on page 29. NACO indicts 93 schools for cheating, backlist 52 supervisors. You can find more on page 7, and this is a warning so we can do something about our educational standard that is dropping. No wonder we're having the issue of exam malpractice on an increase every day. And I think this is where the Ministry of Education, Rachel, need to do something about issues like these that we are having. Because if something is not being done, by the next NICO we are writing, the country will be conducting. You see that the numbers are increasing. So we are hoping that something will be done about that so we can actually improve the curriculum of our schools and then let the welfare of the teachers and everything be done well so our education standard can go back to as high as it used to be. So I think that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On this day newspaper, Nigeria lost 2.3 trillion naira to oil theft this year. Statement coming from the Senate asks panels to probe security agencies. Moves to transfer social investment program to presidency. Worries insecurity may lead to acute food crisis. Seeks adequate military presence in North. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 10. Chief Justice of Nigeria to judges, our work shall testify for us when we are gone. More details can be found on page 34. Niger Delta roads in deplorable condition, Clark tells Tinubu. Silva remains our Bayelsa Kuba candidate. A statement coming from APC. We will step up campaign instead, Ganduje boast. Ex-governor appeals SAG, asks court to stay judgment execution. Our state doesn't deserve serial deceiver, says Diri. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 10. IMF, Tinubu's policies paving way for inclusive growth, revises Nigeria's growth prospect downwards to 2.9%. And coming from Edun, with global rise in debt service costs Nigeria focus on encouraging domestic foreign investment, where we can see a picture story, an IMF World Bank annual meeting in Marrakech, where we can see our Minister of Finance, Edun, and then we can also see a director of the IMF, and then also we can see Minister of Finance for Cape Verde. And at the downside, we can see another story saying Israeli ambassador insists Hamas must be wiped out. You can find details on page 35, and these are the major headlines on this day newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper, starting with a big story. Federal government's bid for concrete roads to spike. CapEx amid the 10 trillion naira own contractors. And we have a picture story here showing us Federal government controls about 34,000 kilometers out of Nigeria's estimated 193,200 kilometers of roads. And then we're seeing that 2.4 trillion naira has been spent on road construction in 24 years. And then the amount allocated for road construction yearly, you can see it being shown, it differs from one year to another. And you can take a closer look at that. No wonder the minister was actually, suggesting that rather than us having those other roads, let us have concrete roads because they're easier to maintain. You can take a closer look at that and see how we are being affected and how it will actually turn out to be eventually. Other stories still on the Guardian newspaper. We have theft, vandalism, undermine gas production as strain 7 years completion. You can find that on page 3. US declares Bazoum ousted a coup, suspend military aid training to Niger. You can find that on page 3. Over 3,000 Nigerians on death row amid call to abolish capital punishment. More can be found in the paper. And we have Israel-Palestine envoy defend position as NCPC suspend Christian pilgrimage. Court remands siblings for clubbing uncle to death. You can find more of that on page 8. Downside of the paper, Senate moved to tackle alleged oil theft by security forces and militant groups. More can be found on page 3. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, 61.60% make English mathematics as NECO releases SSCE results. IMF revises Nigeria's economic growth downwards over weak oil and gas. Army General backs 7-year imprisonment for stealing $2.1 million, 1.65 billion naira. You can find details on page 8. I will work closely with NBC to promote media freedom, a statement coming from Malagi. And the big story on Blueprint, Senate props 2.3 trillion naira lost to oil theft in 2023. Fingers security forces, militia groups, host communities, and others. Alleges use of sophisticated methods by bunkers and collaborators, raises the alarm over food security. You can find details of the big story on page 6. APC Silver fight back as court stops Guba candidate from Bayelsa poll. Ex-minister remains our candidate, says party. 5.4 million to vote in Bayelsa Imo Kogi polls, statement coming from INEC. Another downside of Blueprint, police confirm kidnap of 4 Nasarawa Varsity students. Tinubu endorsed road construction with concrete, says Umayi. More millionaires to emerge in UBA Super Savers draw. You can find details on page 31, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Well, we hope all the students that have been kidnapped from one state to another will actually be rescued. Since this thing is moving in slowly, moves like more like, I do not understand the right word to use at this moment, but I hope that something will be done. From Zamfara, we had Christina, and now it has gone to Nasarawa State. We do not know which state will be the next, but this is just to call on our security agency to please intensify their effort to rescue those who have already been abducted, and then to make sure that we have all of this safe initiative in most schools so that they can be protected from any, and will I talk about people invading into the school. So we hope to see more of that. Well, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the New Telegraph newspaper. And a New Telegraph newspaper, still on the IMF, Tinubu's reform will stimulate inclusive growth. We say revise Nigeria's growth prospect. With global hiking rate, Edu banks on tax reform to navigate debts. More can be found on the front page and inside the paper. Nigeria rises in African trade country rankings. You can find that on page 25. Niger Delta Road Clerk writes Tinubu says federal government shouldn't take citizens' patience for granted. You can find that in the paper as well. MMA2 raises tariff for car park VIP walking lodge. You can find on 4 and 28 of the paper. Tinubu blames road failure on use of adulterated ASAP. You can find that on page 5 too. And we have ethanol blending in fuel refinery will reduce pump price. You can find that also in the paper. The big story on oil theft, Senate probes, orders probe of security agency in the Niger Delta. Says Nigeria has lost 3 trillion naira revenue this year. Reps probe use of dollar as legal tender. Freight over reduction in investment. Says weaker naira will increase external debt servicing costs, stunt economic growth and hinder job creation. You can find detail on page 2. Tinubu said to tackle flooding. You can find that on page 31. Court okays Edo Deputy Governor's impeachment. Army General jailed 7 years for stealing $2.1 million and 1.65 billion naira. Gunmen abduct 4 Nasarawa varsity students with data found on page 2 and 6. INEC clears 5.4 million voters to elect in Bayelsa, Imo and Kogi governors, and then holds mock accreditation on Saturday. Court disqualify APC Silva from poll, and then disqualification a distraction. We will appeal coming from Ganduchi. You can find more detail of that in the paper. And on 2023 NACO, 737,308 scored credits in math, English, and 3 others. Abia tops with 85.53% in English and math, 3 others. Zamfara leads with 39.1%, and this just signals where there is a need to actually intensify talking about education. You can find more detail of that on page 4. Downside, we have a study that says using phone on the toilet could cause permanent damage to the body. So for those of us who are fond of that, it's good that you read that study on page 28, and that's all the New Telegraph newspaper.
On leadership newspaper at the top, we can still see debt management. Don't miss out, offer close today. Now we have a trend: operatives kill kidnappers in Bauchi, and on numbers we have 99,985 Nigerian students enrolled in UK in 5 years. And tell her we did a little breakdown yesterday, that is, we have at least 20,000 students every year enrolling in UK universities living, and most of these students will definitely go for professional courses, and we would have fewer of them coming back. And whether we like it or not, we are losing intelligent people internationally, and and no wonder we are seeing that the government just have to keep going and finding methods like bringing back retired doctors to work. I just hope something is being done. This means we need to fix our schools, we need to fix our system. People need to be employed, because a lot of people want to gain employment, but they will go through school, because sometimes getting employment directly is not easy, and this is why we're seeing this much wave. You can find details of both stories on page 2. Low oil output forces IMF to revise Nigeria's growth. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 7. Concerns as rep screen NDDC board nominees afresh. The big story: amid scarcity, liter of petrol sells for 700 naira, 650 naira in Sokoto, Gombe, and others. The writer under the story: marketers blame high cost of diesel for increase. Queues resurface in Abuja as confusion trails return of subsidy. Nigeria imports 23 billion liters of petrol in 1 year. You can find details on page 4. 50% of teachers appeal against disqualification. Liberia decides, NEC releases provisional. Nigerians displaced 1.3 million. You can find details on page 7, and that's all the news on leadership newspaper.
Right, let's take a look at the Daily Times newspaper. The Daily Times inaugurate editorial board for global intellectual complexion. You can find that in the paper. The big story for the Daily Times says the Niger Delta senator fingers those behind oil theft. Be bold enough to probe security agency in oil-rich region, Senate tells the federal government. Upper Chamber kicks off own investigation. $2.3 trillion crook stolen in 1 year by cabals. Security operative lobbying for posting of Niger Delta coming from Oshobode. You can find more of that story on page 2. More ripples surround Enugu governorship tribunal verdicts. You can find more of that story inside the paper, and that's all on the Daily Times newspaper.
On Nigerian Standard, we have Plateau NUJ wants government to overhaul own media. Local airlines demand jet fuel import license. We have paid to prioritize strengthening health sector. You can find more details on page 2. Governor Yusuf rewards casual workers for returning $16,000. The big story on the paper, federal government unveils draft regulations for upstream oil operations. Federal government approves contract appointment for retired health workers. Again, government kidnap varsity students in Nasarawa State. You can start with the details on the front page and continue and on page 1. And then we have a picture story showing representatives of Governor Mutfwang of Plateau State, Honorable Josephine P.O., Deputy Governor, in a photograph with the first female chairman of NUJ Ayuku Paspo, government functionaries, and NUJ ESCOs yesterday during a courtesy call at the government house in Rayfield, Jos. And that's all the news on the Nigeria Standard.
Before we move further with other paper review, we'd love to take a break at this moment so we can let you choose the story we've been looking at, especially in regard to the probe of oil theft. It seems to be becoming the order of the day, what the country have lost just in this year, not to talk about the previous years that oil theft have been an issue to the country. So when we come back, we'll open the phone lines, hear what your own contributions are concerning any of the stories. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zoom on Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies on Echo Television. We've been looking at a number of stories on the paper, and at this moment, our number is displayed on your screen. To do well to call us, we'd love to hear what your own contribution is concerning all of the stories on the paper regarding the probe of the dollars that Reps is saying cannot be legal tender in Nigeria, and also with the issue of the money we lose to oil theft in the country is still under probe. And then we have a number of stories on the paper. We'd love to hear what your own take is, how our education is going, the number of people as NICO has releases its results. So do well to call us. Remember to turn down the volume of your TV set, summarize your point in a minute so other callers can also get the room to call in and air their views. I still have Rachel Tenzi with me in the studio. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir.
All right, let's take a look at Nigerian News Direct. The story on Nigerian News Direct we have by Yelsa Guba. Silva files appeal challenging disqualification. You can find detail of that on page 2. Reps to probe alleged adoption of dollar and other foreign currencies as legal tender in Nigeria. Detail found on page 2. And on forgery allegation, Atiku Abubakar clarifies confusion in academic credentials amidst controversy. Admit using Sadiq Abubakar as proxy for WAEC exam. You can find more detail of that on page 14. More millionaires to emerge in UBA Super Savers draw. Detail found on page 2. Sanwo-Olu approved 500% car loan for workers, swears in Agoro as the HOS. You can find detail on page 13. Naira plunges to 1,010 naira at a dollar as demand soars on black market. Detail found on page 14. Foreign investment in Nigeria's telecom sector drops to $25.81 million in the second quarter of 2023, and we can see a picture story showing the governor of Lagos State. So you can do well to grab the paper and see more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Daily Independent by Elsa Gruber poll, APC says judgment disqualifying Silva unjust, undemocratic. Silva heads to appeal court, file stay of execution. Nigeria's visa on arrival policy to be on reciprocity. This is coming from the minister. You can find details on page 7. The big story on the paper: minister contractors on collusion cause over concrete road. Federal government gives contractors strict condition to use asphalt, and you can find more details inside the paper on page 28. IMF lowers Nigeria's economic growth to 2.9%. Atiku explains why WAEC certificate bears Sadiq Abubakar. 737, 308 score 5 credit in math English as NECO releases result. Panic as price of cooking gas hits 1,000 naira 200 per kg. You can find details on page 6. And on oil theft, Senate probes security agencies, militia groups, and others. Palestinians scramble for safety as Israel pounds Gaza Strip to punish Hamas. You can find details on page 6. We have another story saying reps probe use of foreign currencies for transactions in Nigeria. And at the downside of the paper, Tinubu to surprise National Social Investment Program, a statement coming from the Senate. I'll take that story again. Tinubu to supervise National Social Investment Program. You can find more details on page 2. And that's all the news on Daily Independent.
Intending to be legal tender in our own country
because we allowed it. Okay. Because we allowed it, because I know schools that are being paid in US dollars here in Nigeria. So when you hear things like this, it's not far. I know people are beginning to think, what are those things that we are, that it's what are those commodities or services that people pay for in Nigerian dollars? And the number one that comes to my mind is school. And for somebody out there watching, you know, one school or another, American school, British school, with all of those names, standards, and all of that coming. And yes, parents pay in dollars. I know schools for sure. There are schools like that parents are paying in dollars. And then it's because we allowed it, Sele. You won't find a Nigerian school in the US, for example, and you pay in naira. It's not going to happen like that. You won't even find a Nigerian restaurant in the UK and then you pay for the food in naira. It's not going to be allowed. But when you see certain things like that, it's because we allowed it. It will not happen without us allowing it. And this is where we need to tighten our monetary policies in this country, because whether we like it or not, we see how it affects us. This might be a 0.0001% factor to the many problems when it comes to devaluing our currency. However, if it is in play, then it is a factor good enough to look into, because whether we like it or not, it's only a matter of time before it grows and it becomes a normal thing. It's not supposed to be like that. And yes, the Senate should probe it. How was it allowed in the first place, and how is it gaining grounds? Because I believe it has increased for it to come to a noticeable level that the Senate is beginning to talk about it. However, it has been existing for a very long period of time, so we allowed it. So it's about time we stop allowing it and take drastic measures to making sure such things are not seen or happening to our economy, because we can see that our dollar, our currency naira, is having a free fall, and we need to do everything, whatever it takes to gain its value back.
You know, Richard, I asked this question because it baffled me. This is not the first time we're
Mm.
bringing this to the forefront for our government official and the agency or the body that is bent on monitoring all of this policy to make sure that is our own currency that is being in circulation. And then with how scarce the dollar is,
Mm.
we've seen how fight has even affected our own
Yeah,
naira.
we're
That you have to buy
seeing
a dollar at over 1,000
1,000.
plus.
Yes,
Imagine, and if care is not taken before the end of the year, you'll be
it
hearing
will
that
be higher.
it's 1 5 2,000 to a dollar, and that's not it. Because our naira keep falling, just like you said, and just like you said, we permit it. We're looking forward to a policy or to a time where we don't have to wait for things to get so bad, and then
Yes.
we look for how to correct it rather than looking for how to prevent it in the first place. So we have seen that even our own growth has gone down to about 2.9% when it
0.9%.
was
Yeah.
3.1%. So quite a number of factors that have actually led to the fall of our naira. So we hope that this probe will not just end in the paper, but then we see that if the reps successfully are able to probe this and say well and see what is the cause of it, they'll be able to stop it, because it seems as if Nigeria has become a dumping ground for anything.
For
If you want
anything,
to
yeah,
get away
anything
with any
goes.
crime, you
Yeah.
want to get away with anything, Nigeria is the place for that. We hope that we wake up, put our legs on the floor as a country to say this cannot stand, and
It
then
can't.
it will
Yeah.
not stand eventually. So
Yes.
we'll keep our fingers crossed to see more being done about that. Well, let's take a next look at the next paper, which is the Voice of Liberty. And on the Voice of Liberty, we're seeing President Tinubu makes fresh appointment. We've seen those stories on the paper where we have about 5 new media aides, where we see Fela among many other people that were being given that appointment. We have 87.4 trillion naira debt. Stakeholders frown at federal government excessive borrowing. You can find detail of that story in the paper. Federal government okays engagement of retired doctors, nurses, others on contract. You can find more detail of that story, and that is all on the Voice of Liberty.
On Nature News newspaper, starting with the big story, we have Nigeria grapple with health and environmental impact of firewood cooking. We have 150 million Nigerians risk lung cancer. This is coming from the MBS and Sele. We must agree that we use a lot of firewood, and now we know that people who are reliable to lung cancer are those who smoke. However, we are seeing that now even cooking with firewood is making you prone to that, because we are seeing over 150 million Nigerians at the risk of lung cancer. And I just hope well, I wanted to say I just hope something could be done about it. Looking at how much gas is now,
I mean,
Kero has
Rachel,
become a very scarce
Rachel, before you
commodity. And
continue, I was in the
yes,
market during the weekend, and then a woman, after getting foodstuff for the house, decided to say, okay, let me get Kero for just 300 naira. Rachel, we're talking about a container, and then in that container, it wasn't even up to
yes,
half.
it
We're
won't
talking
be
about
up to
quarter.
half. Yes,
And that is, in fact, she got
and
that
I'm sure she's
kerosene at the fuel station.
to on her firewood, I'm sure, on her charcoal,
Very,
something like
very
that.
true.
Yes,
Or possibly to use for her little lamp. And we know some of these lamp also exhale some
yes, they
smoke
do. Yes,
eventually.
they do. And then we're seeing that we are at risk. So I don't know what could be done about it, as everybody is going for firewood and charcoal for to be able to maintain some standard of living, so that when you have food, you can't say I can't cook because there is no gas. But I just hope that we would eventually move past this, that one day the price of kerosene will be down, and even our liquid gas will be down, and then we won't have to be at the risk of using firewood. And you can find details of this story on page 3. Pioneering green housing in South Africa, lessons for African nations. Find details on page 10. And on climate change, IMF, World Bank vow to support African economies. Rising waters, communities across Nigeria adapting to unprecedented flooding. More details can be found on page 5. And on COP28, President designate calls for swift action on loss and damage, fund for vulnerable nations. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 5. There is a nature life column, earthworms and its benefits to nature. You can find details on page 20. ICCDI Africa enriches Nigeria with 50 emerging climate justice advocates. There's also amazing benefits of omega-3 fish oil. You can read more of that on page 15. And at the downside of the paper, for sports, we have Vardy in is a legend. We are not rivals. A statement coming from Ehanacho. You can read details of his statement on page 21, and that's all the news on Nature News newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the business day, the world of business, where we have Nigeria Alternative Energy thirsty for infrastructure and policies. You can start reading the drivers from the front page down to page 30. The big story here, flush with cash bank boost lending. You can find more of that story inside the paper. And we have job losses in manufacturing hit 3-year high. This is really very, very alarming. You can do well to find more of that on page 30. Wealthy Nigerians invest in varsity education amidst FX pressure, where we are seeing with the public tertiary institution system facing many challenges. A growing number of wealthy Nigerians have invested in university education to provide quality learning, infrastructure and development for over 10 years, and that is just in relation to the number we have reached. And I begin to ask, why are we having wealthy Nigerian resulting to that? I mean, you don't even have guarantee when your boy is in any of this public university when he or she is going to graduate. You only know the year they got admission into university. So for like a 4-year course, you are hoping to
5 years
get into 6 years as well,
At
Rachel.
least,
That is
yes.
how bad it has gotten. But we hope that this is an eye-opener for us to invest in our own education
We
here in
need
the
to.
country, because believe you me, whether we like it or not, with the way things are moving, if we do not give the educational sector the attention it needs, you wake up one day to see that here we are advocating for the girl child to be in school. It will even get to the point that even the male child will not have an environment to study. But the number of girls that are being kidnapped every day in university, tell me, which parent will want his ward to be in the university the way things are moving? And it's not as if you can do a home school for your child at tertiary institution. The highest you can do is maybe at the primary level. That's the first school. But then how far can we go with this? So I think this is an eye-opener. Beyond the security, let's also see that all of the infrastructure, whatever that is needed to make sure that when you go to school, you are comfortable to read in that school. When you go to school, you know that for sure in the next 4 years, I am having a 4-year course, I can graduate. And then with the way some of lecturers even frustrate the life of students in the school, it will tell you that a lot of things need to be done. So our fingers are crossed. We hope that it will not, the school will no longer be for the wealthy, but everybody will be able to afford and go to school.
You know, Sele, my major concern when it comes to education is not that I'm not excited hearing that wealthy Nigerians are investing in varsity, and it's more of what varsity are they investing in, and of course is the private universities. Whether we like it or not, we have more and more private universities springing up, and this is as a result of the failure of the Nigerian government towards education. That is what it is, whether we want to say it as it is or not. That is what it means. And then whether we like it or not, as time goes on, tertiary university will become expensive, because we know how the private system works. Is more on profit, while the government is there to subsidize. That is why a government exists, is to make basic amenities available to the masses, to the majority at affordable prices. That's why we have government schools, we have government hospitals, we have every government facility, we have the government in charge of water, we have the government in charge of electricity, we have the government in charge of building roads, the government in charge of virtually every basic amenity, so that the masses, the major population of the country can be able to access it at a rate that is affordable. And then when you see the government not being able to provide these basic facilities and need, then we see privatization stepping into the system. For sure, we do have a mixed economy. We know that for sure. But then still yet, the government is supposed to be the majority when it comes to providing these basic needs. And then that's why we see more private hospitals. If you want the best, if you want quick attention, if you don't have to wait in emergency for hours and probably die there, the best option is to go to private hospitals. And then the question is, how many people can afford this? And we can put this same logic and explanation to our education system, where we are having more private schools, universities, secondary school, primary schools, and over the time it begins to look like you have to be very wealthy in Nigeria, as it is, to have a good standard of education. And then people who don't have that much are left to go to government schools that the teachers are not functioning as they should because they are not being paid properly, or they are left to sit down on stones without basic needs like desks, books, boards, uniform, and all of that. And then it's like when you go to a government school in Nigeria, you're left with an average education. And if you want to get the best, you have to go to a private school. And this is my fear concerning these universities, that we have wealthy Nigerians investing in it, because whether we like it or not, the government is supposed to be the sole investor, the major investor in education in the country. And if you want standard education, we should be able to get it at the government-owned universities or secondary school. And over time, if we allow this to keep going on, education will become very, very expensive, and it will look like it's only the wealthy people that can have access to wealthy education. I just hope that Nigerian government step up to their responsibilities and do the needful regarding education and every other sector that needs improvement.
To sit up. While you were talking, my mind just went back to, we remember the 1 year mandatory service. You have to serve your country, and then for most core members, they have been sent to serve in schools or to actually teach, because most of the government schools lack teachers. So they totally depend on core members. I know of a school that, talking about the core subject, English, math, literature, physics, chemistry, it's the work of core members. The moment core members are passing out, they no longer have teachers. So it's more like that school is not functioning again. And this was a school that at a time was a private school before it was handed over to the government, or the government got. And the moment the government took control of it, everything went down. The standard of education is down, and we said we are doing free education. A lot of work needs to go into the fact that if we want to make education accessible to everybody, then we need to do the work. Here we're seeing on the paper that most of the teachers in the northern part of Nigeria are not qualified, Rachel. So what are we saying? And we are talking about wealthy Nigerians investing in education. So just like you said, we don't want a day you wake up and then it's only the rich and the mighty that can afford to send their wards to school. We look forward to that. Still on the business day, we have other stories here that say 5 reasons petrol is scarce and fuel station is closing. Where we remember when Mile Kyari said, the DG of the NNPC, he said the reason why some of the queues are returning. So you can do well to find more of the reasons on page 28 of the Business Day newspaper. Also, we have IMF downgrades growth prospect for Nigeria to 2.9%. You can find more of that story on page 31, and that's on Business Day newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Inter Juventus in Lukman race. Napoli ready 60 million euros for Jesus to replace Osimhen. Owoniyi to return after break. Why Cardiff stop callings from Eagles friendlies. We have Amade grabs winner in UAE. Mourinho unsure of Roma stay. Madrid to announce new win contract. You can find Madrid to announce new Vinicius contract. You can find more details on page 3. The big story on the paper, the ones who went away, and you can see all the players we are seeing. Udogi playing for Italy, Balogun for USA, we have Unaru for Japan, we have Bazamu for Ireland, we have Saka playing for England, and we have Musa Ali for playing for Germany. You can find more details of the Nigerian players that are not playing for Nigeria. Lukaku's Chelsea exit fee set for 2024. Arsenal lead race for 14 million euros. Teen Wonder. You can find details on page 4. And at the downside of the paper, United keeping tabs on Neves. Hazard retires from football at 32. You can find details inside the paper, and that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
I just had a heartbreak looking at our players that are playing. Yeah, that are playing for other nations, and it begins to tell you that we have a lapse in our own country. No wonder our players, believe you me, even as much as they say that it's because they love the game, but it's because the pay is not good in this country, Rachel. That is just one factor there. And these are players that we can make millions and dollars from in this country. If only we can actually utilize that. This is just to tell us that there are a lot of sectors. Now we say IMF is talking about 2.9%, and that is for oil and gas, Rachel. So imagine if we begin to key into other, if oil and gas is failing, what else can we, turn out method can we get back money? And we're talking about entertainment here. The media is quite a lot, but our government, we just hope that we wake up to actually do the right thing. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for doing this with me. And thank you so much to our viewers and supporters for keeping the date with us on the Dailies. Until we come here again, do have a blessed day ahead.